So we are clapping into the first Truxtun Talks podcast, where we're looking to educate and inform people about psychedelic assisted therapy work, specifically the work that we're doing here at Truxtun, and do so by way of talking to people that have come through our program. Um, Amos, Amos and I went to West Point together. He graduated a year ahead of me. He's an armor officer and then an intelligence officer, and we overlapped paths through a friend at Harvard when Amos was just about to graduate from HBS, and he came through Truxtun 24-002, our second ever retreat that we ran, and has just been an advocate for this work and an incredible friend since then. So that being said, love to have Amos, introduce himself a little bit and kind of see where the conversation goes.
Yeah.
What's up, guys? Yeah, stoked to be on here. Glad to. I'm sorry, I gotta pause a little bit. The feedback is really loud.
Here.
Oh yeah, that's better.
Okay. Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, man. Like it's been a joy, and it's been almost 2 years since we last started this little journey together. But yeah, like CJ said, I was at HBS doing my MBA and really had lost a lot of direction in my life and was trying to figure out what was going on. And chance had it, one of our mutual friends, Nick Maines, had done the first Truxtun retreat with CJ, and then we were able to connect. And really, I mean, Truxtun offered this opportunity to connect with veterans in a space that I had no comprehension of, right? I think all the vets I had met at HBS at a time were very hard driving, very ambitious folks looking to go into investment banking and McKinsey and different kinds of consulting firms and startups and defense tech. And this is the first time getting a little bit outside that bubble and seeing vets that were on a wholly different path and give that opportunity to see okay, maybe we can do something a little bit different here. So yeah, I'll hand it back to either CJ or Will.
I love it.
Yeah.
So sick.
Yeah, Will,
What
go
did you
ahead.
think? Well, okay, so yeah, I hear that. Like what you said resonates with me that like a lot of times the way that veterans communicate to one another is so like scripted. It's like, what do you do? Where are you from? What unit were you in? What do you want? What is your 5-year plan? And it's like, it's very odd and uncomfortable at times for us to show up vulnerably and just be like, dude, I really struggling. Like, because we all like have like struggles, right? Mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, like whatever. I think that's what bonded CJ and I together was we were just like, dude, we are just two broken vets trying to like mend the wounds, and whatever the VA offered was not working. That was not it. And then you're in
Yeah.
these like elite programs where you're expected to like show up to class and like be squared away, and then you're looking at new jobs and you're just like,
Hmm.
well, I don't know if I want to jump back on a hamster wheel that just sounds like a just awful, you know? So you kind of have these like questions of existential dread where you're like, dude, what am I doing? What is my purpose when you take off the uniform? And
Yeah.
um, so yeah, I don't know, like how did you kind of navigate that? Like it seems like Truxton came into your life at like a really pivotal moment because you were getting ready to go work overseas.
Yeah. No, it was super interesting, right? So exactly what you said, right? Like I found my close friends through the vets at these programs, but we had this kind of mental block in terms of how we could communicate our emotions, mainly because I think a lot of us didn't know how to feel our emotions, and that was almost across the board the single most common statement made by all my veteran friends was like, yeah, man, I don't feel much. What are you excited about? What are you stoked on? What is gonna get your mind ready for this next job or whatever? It's like, I don't know, man. I'm just doing the thing that's gonna get me some money, maybe a little bit more prestige, and how do you feel about that? It's just a thing to do. Are you happy? I don't really know. And if I could describe this like across the board for a lot of us, it was just like emotional flattening. And for me, it manifested itself in like pretty extreme emotional numbness, and it was pretty easy to tell. If anything, like I'm very thankful to have gone to an MBA program because, especially at somewhere like HBS, because you get exposed to the top of everything, right? You have all, I mean, at HBS we had everything, right? And CJ can attest to this at Wharton, like you have all the opportunities in the world, right? You have all the prestige, you have influence, you have job opportunities on job opportunities, you have access to exclusive clubs and VC networks and entrepreneurship and all these amazing things. And you get to go on cool trips with like friends and cool people and meet really rich, powerful, interesting folks. And you're sitting there and you're just like, why am I not excited by any of this, right? And that was a pretty strong clincher of a moment. It was like my second year at HBS. I was like, I'm almost certainly not happy because I certainly don't feel anything and I have everything on paper, right? So it was at that point I started exploring, okay, like what does it mean to, if I just put myself and my emotional and spiritual health first for the first time in my life, what would that look like? And you try to do everything. So like for me at the time, like I'm new to this, so I'm like, okay, let's do meditation and let's start journaling and let's start going to therapy, right? The cool thing about I think healing is that it's not a one size fits all. It's trying to find different kinds of tools that create the space for you to start healing. And I feel fortunate enough that like I found Truxtun because Truxtun offered a space where I could initially start opening and accessing emotions in a way that I had never had an opportunity to do so. I don't know if I answered your original question about like how I ended up choosing to go to Truxtun and like what it did for
Yeah.
me, but it was it was just like trying everything under the bus, or under the sun, I guess. Anything that like was a thing, what was I was willing to try, right? Because it just didn't. I had no fucking idea what I was doing, right? Like, what does it mean to start feeling again when you haven't felt? Nobody knows,
Yeah.
right? Like, no therapist can tell you what that is. You can only experience it for yourself, right? So yeah, like I had no idea what I was getting into when I signed up for Truxtun, but it was such a critical space that allowed me the comfortability and space and the time to feel vulnerable and then to access emotions in a way that I never had in the past.
Yeah. It's beautiful.
It's so hard to do that at school too, when you're
Yeah.
surrounded by hard chargers who just are arguably not in touch with their own emotions as well, and
Mm.
everyone's trying to one up each other, and oh, I got this job, oh well, I got this job, and it's really hard to get in touch with yourself. I think, I mean, it's like drives you lower, especially
Yeah.
like to your point when you were talking about just like you have everything, you have every resource at your fingertips, and it's like, why am I not fulfilled, right? I've achieved everything that I thought I wanted to achieve. What is missing? Why is it me, right? And then the conversation goes inward and you start to like chew away at yourself, and that's when it gets like really kind of scary at
Yeah.
times. So
I mean, that's
yeah,
exactly it, right? You
really
have to go
scary.
inwards. I think it's super easy, right? Like, even, I mean, for a lot of us, everyone has different experiences, but like for a lot of us, we're just like, yeah, the minute we get out of West Point, things will be better, right? And then you get into Army, and it's like, the minute I get out of Bullock, it's going to be better. And the minute I get out of Ranger, it's going to be better. And the minute I get out of this first lame duty station, it'll get better. The minute I get to my SF unit, it'll get better. The minute I get selected for Ranger, or RASP, like it'll get better. And then it ends up like the minute I get out of Army, it'll be better, right? And it's just this is the constant confluence between like external versus internal happiness, right? It's very very easy to point and direct fingers at the external situations that make us unhappy, and it's very hard to point it at ourselves, because it's hard and it's not easy to understand what's going in ourselves. It's easy to be like, all right, as long as I'm not in the Army, I'll be happy, right? And then yeah, check it out. I got out of the Army and went to HBS. Wasn't happy still, nothing changed, right? Um, so yeah, going inward is a tough question for us, and especially for vets, and like especially if you're like a high achieving ambitious vet, like it makes sense. You stay on the hamster wheel. How do we get to this next thing? And this is, I mean, just not just vets, right? This is everyone. Like all of us across society, especially Western society, look for the next big thing. This is what society drives us to. And if we're not happy now, what's the next big thing that will make us happy? Whether that's a relationship or a job or a house or a vacation or whatever the fuck it is, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So like searching inward, and it's been a long journey to understand what searching inward means. But yeah, psilocybin and then through Truxtun, it was definitely like a cool modality to help me look inwards and figure what that all meant, you know?
You also did some really cool stuff too, like before each or after, was it before or after each Truxton retreat, you spent time in silence, like on
Yeah.
a Vipassana retreat?
Yeah. So both retreats, the first retreat by kind of happy accident, I ended up at a monastery for about a week after the Truxton retreat, and that was so important, right? Because you know there's I mean, I don't know what the statistics are, but a good number of folks in the U.S., like percentage wise, use psilocybin.
Mhm.
On like maybe not like every month, but like at least on an annual basis. I think there's something like quite high, somewhere between like 10% or something of folks try it. Um, and it's cool. Like some people do it for fun, some people do it for like therapeutic purposes, but for a lot of folks, it just doesn't stick, right? I mean, I think even in the retreat settings when it's done by like guided psychologists or therapists and something like Truxton, it's hard to get it to stick because we have this beautiful experience. We learn something new about ourselves or the world or what it means to look inward. And then 3 days later, we go back home and return to our work, return to our life, we return to our MBA program, and we start the same cycle again, right?
Yeah.
And no matter how much you can like go back to that original epiphany, it's not something that is built into your life. So unless something manifestly changes in your life, it's hard to really integrate. I was super lucky. I just by chance was invited to go to this monastery by a friend and spend a week in mindfulness and meditation, and the timing worked out, so it was right after the Truxton retreat. So that gave me the opportunity to integrate these learnings for a week long period and practice it on a daily basis, right? And not just a daily basis, an hourly, a minute basis. Every moment of every day was spent in mindfulness and intention and meditation and inward reflection. And that really helped solidify all the learnings I had while I was at the Truxton retreat. But yeah, it was crazy, man. And even afterwards, right, it completely shifted the way I treated and approached life. And I went to the Middle East after a few weeks after the Truxton retreat, and it completely revamped like my perspective towards the kind of work I wanted to do in the Middle East, whether it was in humanitarian aid or development finance, and the love I wanted to share with the world, right? But in a very other plausible scenario, I could have just gone back to my MBA program, graduated, went over to the Middle East, and yeah, I had a lovely experience with Truxton, but nothing clicked, right? Nothing like was integrated, and I think this is one of the important parts that like psilocybin, these kinds of retreats, right? Like it's just a tool. It can be used for, I won't say good or bad, right? It can help or it can hurt you in different ways. It really matters like how you allow it to help or hurt you. And then most importantly afterwards, how you choose to utilize the learnings in order to help or hurt you in your life. And that's a daily, intentional, constant battle, or journey, we'll call it, right? Not a battle necessarily.
Yeah. I remember one of your intentions on the first retreat was like, hey, like, is this decision to go overseas a good one for me? Is it in
Yeah.
alignment with my truth? Like, um, I mean, how was your experience over there? Like, I'm
Yeah.
sure you could talk about that for weeks.
Yeah. Yeah, so
Yeah.
I guess for like anyone who might be listening, right? The quick story was that at HBS, I started recruiting my second year and was just like at a loss for jobs, right? I was not interested in PE, I was not interested in VC, I'm not interested in consulting, I don't want to do defense tech. Like nothing really appealed to me. And I settled in on this like very, very niche field of development finance, primarily because it was the only company that I was inspired by. This company does development finance in immature, either immature, developing, or conflict economies. So the first office the company was incorporated in was Afghanistan. And then since then, it's spread to, I think, 20 different countries around the world. Almost all in developing contexts, but then with a specific value proposition for war zones or conflict zones. So like Ukraine or Palestine or Iraq or Afghanistan, these types of places. So for me, when I was still doing the same thing when I was at HBS looking for this work, right? Because I couldn't find meaning and purpose within myself, so I found it within my job. So I was looking for the most incredible job there was to help the most amount of people that I could help, right? And at the time, so that was, I started recruiting in 2023, going to 2024 when I signed with the firm. And that's when, of course, October 7th kicked off with Palestine and the Gaza war really took off in those last few months. And it became super clear to me that if I wanted to like have the most amount of purpose in my life, that this was the job to do, right? And at the time, I was really conflicted because I had made this promise to myself I was going to choose myself and work on myself, and at the same time I was like I felt really drawn to this job in Palestine, but it was bringing me back to the Middle East. It was bringing me back into wars, bringing me back into a place where it didn't seem on paper to be a very healing place to be. It seemed very chaotic. It seemed very violent. It seemed very sad and angry. So I was conflicted, I wasn't sure if I was going to take that job, even though it made sense to me from an external standpoint, right? But I wanted to make
Yeah.
sense from an internal standpoint. And, one of the things I realized in the retreat, and this can go down a little bit deeper, was that Ben Smith, who was my like main sitter during this event, like he helped curate a space for me where I felt so comfortable that I was able to express and feel emotions that I had not felt in years. Main of which was love, right? Which is what we all like to talk about, right? Like this is what life is about. What is love, right? And I can't really explain it in words necessarily, but I felt it, right? And I realized that I did have a deep, overwhelming amount of love within me, and
Yeah.
it only made sense that if I have this amount of love within me to share it with the world, right? So that became the internal compass of like why I wanted to go to Palestine. It was no longer let's figure out how to go to this conflict area so I can help out as many people as possible. That's a beautiful notion, right? There's obviously nothing wrong with that. It's a very noble idea, but that was a very external purpose, right? The internal purpose was I have an overwhelming reservoir of love and I want to share it with people who might need it the most because I can, right? And in this case, it was with the people of Palestine. So that's what I ended up doing, and it was, I mean, quite frankly, right? It was I've just recently left Palestine a few months ago, but it was the most beautiful year and happiest year of my life. Not because of everything that's going on, obviously, but because of the perspective I was able to have and the mindset that I approached it. Even though I would consider metrically more difficult than any of my deployments in the past, right? The kind of work we were doing and the place we were operating in. But my perspective was one of love and compassion and contentment, and ultimately what I consider to be happiness.
It's so cool. It
Yeah.
made me think of how like we tell people like to set intentions where it's like you ask questions in the ceremony like what does this feel like, or what does this feel like in my body, what does love feel like,
Mm,
and then to like make a decision for your career or your life that is in alignment with like your internal compass and like what your heart is telling you is like so atypical from what Western society teaches us to do, and especially the military, because it's like we go off data, we go off hard empirical data, like, oh,
yeah.
go to this top five thing, get this pay salary, like do this thing. Like we don't make decisions emotionally, we make decisions rationally, and we're like praised for that. We like almost like stifle and blunt our like ability to have intuition based on our emotions, and it's like maybe that's part of the design that the military wants, because they just want us to like accomplish the mission at all costs and not really think about our feelings.
Yeah.
But dude, when you step into alignment with your truth and you're like, wow, I'm operating from a place of love, it becomes like the happiest job that you've had. And it's so cool like to
Yeah.
hear that.
And it doesn't matter what job it is, right? Necessarily. I mean, you bring on this interesting point, like, you know, the military is a really interesting institution, and I'm not going to go rant about it all day, but the thing it does and plays with our emotional capacity is, I mean, quite frankly, it's fucked up, right? Like it makes sense why we're trained in this way, but it is so terrible for us as human
Yeah.
beings, right? Like it's about flattening the response to the amygdala in order to get the prefrontal cortex a little more strengthened. The prefrontal cortex is this thing that, has is a regulator. It's a very top-down rational part of our brain to react and respond to situations because yeah, we don't want an emotional response to situations. And this is a super fascinating concept, right? Because I don't think the military would say this, and this is not necessarily what we're taught, but this is the way I indoctrinated it, right? And that matters the most because, like, the way it doesn't really matter what the institution is teaching you, how you're taking that lesson away from the institution and indoctrinating into your body, that is what truly matters. And I think as a young 18-year at West Point, it became very, very clear to me that emotions were not a useful thing, right? I don't
Yeah.
think I like consciously understood that, but like subconsciously it made a lot of sense, right? Like even in training, right? If somebody like whatever op four shows up and like a bunch of blanks are going off and you have to go respond, it's not good to have an emotional visceral response where you're freaking out or like you have no idea what's going on, you're trying to jump back into action or trying to save yourself or trying to hide, right? And that doubly counts when you're going into a deployment or a combat situation, right? Like it's not considered useful if like your buddy next to you gets blown up to just stop, break down and freak out, right? You as a leader, you have guys behind you who are depending on you. You got to continue moving forward. And that's a tough notion to come to terms with because,
Mhm.
you know, what makes us human? It's this idea of emotion. But we're trained to not have emotions. And if I could go back, right, if I could tell myself something a little bit different, even though, and, one, I would have probably told myself not to join the military, but outside of that, right, if I knew I had to be in the military, I would explain to myself the difference between the state of feeling and the state of being, if that makes sense, right? The idea of feeling fear and then the idea of being afraid, right? These two are very different things. And I think as a young man, it was very clear to me at the time that neither was helpful, right? So I don't want to be afraid, neither do I want to feel fear. So let's just shut all of that down. And then, over 10 years, I became very good at that. But what I would tell myself instead is that, yes, being afraid and making decisions from a state of afraidness, that's not really a word, but a state of afraidness, that's not really great, right? Because then you're making decisions based on some external stimuli that's really scary. But feeling fear, that is perfectly okay, right? It is perfectly, and it's actually encouraged to feel fear. It's feel everything, but you don't necessarily have to respond to them in the same way, right? A feeling is just a feeling. You don't need to be the feeling. But it's important that we feel. And
Yeah.
that's something that took years to understand, and something that Truxtun really helped me, and psilocybin and all this like meditation and journaling and yoga and whatever, is understanding that the state of feeling is actually to be encouraged, right? Because when you don't feel, you lock those feelings away and they stay inside you and they fester. And they fester and they
Right.
fester and fester until they become something dark. Not always for
It's
everyone, but for me it did. Right.
Yeah, like it just because we neglect the feelings doesn't mean that they don't exist. So like everything that we've experienced in our entire life, like it's bottling up and it's like a reservoir that's being held somewhere in your body. Like the body
Yeah.
keeps the score. So it's like it's gonna manifest externally through back pain or through gut health issues or through migraines or through cancer in the worst case or like something like that, right? And so that's what I've realized in my own healing journey. And at CJ, I'm sure you've had similar stories too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Just burying it down, burying it down, burying it down. It's got to go somewhere, right? If it's
Yeah.
all energy, it's got to go somewhere. And over time, it starts to eat away at you, literally, internally. Like Will said, in the form of migraines, back pain, knee pain, everything, right? And it's like once you start to get your mind right and you start to get back in line with your true, mind, body, spirit, right? There's a reason that we talk about that. Yeah. Can
Yeah.
you talk about that? Like coming into kind of taking what led you to the point of being like, okay, I need to go on this first retreat. I need to go on, I need to, I'm, I'm taking the jump. What
Yeah.
led you to the point? Feeling these feelings at Harvard, you're, kind of having an existential crisis with a career. You get the developmental finance job, and then I mean, because you left for the Middle East like a couple days
Within a
after
month.
the retreat,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, like
Two
a few
weeks or
days.
something. Yeah.
Right. So
Wow.
it's like pretty big year, big 2 years really, and
Yeah.
we'll get into it in a sec because coming back is even. I mean, you came to the next Truxtun retreat like a
Yeah.
few days after you
Right
got back
after.
from the Middle East. So yeah, that first retreat. What led you to taking the jump for that first one?
Yeah. Man, it's hard to pinpoint. If I think back, so we work now in this. What Truxtun operates is in this space of alternative modalities to therapy, right? Talk therapy really is what we're talking about. Um, and I go back to my original point, which is that like we need to find a space when we're healing that we feel comfortable enough, regulated enough to access the emotions that we want to access. And then we can work on the traumas or the hurts or whatever it is that we want to work on. The problem is finding the space where we can regulate the body and access the emotion. And that's going to be a little bit different for everyone, right? So I coach now from a movement and somatic basis, and I find that movement is one of those spaces where we feel very regulated and we can access emotions. So at that time, I don't think I had that kind of understanding of the world quite yet, but I knew that the things I was trying, whether it was talk therapy or it was meditating or journaling, I wasn't quite getting to the space where my body felt regulated enough and safe enough to access these emotions. It was very clear. I mean, simply speaking, I wasn't accessing the emotions. It just wasn't happening. And things had improved, right? But it was just, I was like, man, if I continue on this, I could be working on this for decades before I even feel anything close to what I would like to be feeling. And I have no idea how to go about doing this. And I mean, I ended up doing some research, and honestly, one of my old army buddies, like he's a doctor now, and at a time he was showing me this book about neuroplasticity and the idea of giving the brain the capacity to rewrite trauma. So psilocybin became this like very quick thing where I was like, wow, this is something that like actively increases neuroplasticity. You know, how do we go about doing this? And I tried it by myself and with a friend recreationally for I think like 2 or 3 times, and it was just like not. One was at a very small dose was a very very good experience. One at a larger dose was kind of terrifying. I had no idea what was going on, right? And this like here's the thing, right? Like this is not a joke of a substance. This is a powerful medicine, as we'll call it, right? And it should be attributed the same type of respect and intention, and also probably requires the same amount of support as like as a medicine does, right, under the supervision of like trained professionals. So I became very intrigued by that notion, and luck would have it, right, like Nick, who was another West Pointer and someone at Harvard that I trusted and talked to, opened that door and was like, hey, like CJ's doing this thing, you want to come along, you want to try this thing? I think the second part of it, of why I made the leap, was because of the community, right? I mean, it's tough. I mean, it is a tough thing to transition back into the civilian world after the military for all the things we kind of talked about, right? All these like crazy things we have done to our minds, and trying to put ourselves in a normal world is just crazy. So the idea of like it was all veterans minus I think like one person or not, but it was like a veteran focused retreat. It was done by West Pointers. I didn't think I actually knew CJ when I was at West Point, but the thing is like we just have this shared experience. Like veterans in general have a shared experience, right? I think West Point veterans has this double shared experience of like, hey, like we went to this very specific institution that trained us in a very specific way and groomed us and brainwashed us, right, in a very specific way, for positive or negative. You know, I won't remark on that, but like these were all the same things we had gone through, and it was so easy to see myself in people like CJ and Will and everyone else. And it was just, yeah, it was an opportunity I couldn't really turn down. And quite frankly, right, like I was a little bit desperate, right? Like I was just I went on this journey, and it had been at this point 3 or 4 months, and I'm an impatient man, and I was like, I want to feel things, right? And that's a terrible approach. I don't, recommend that to anyone when they're trying to heal, when they're telling themselves they need to do something. But at the time, I was really impatient. I was about to go off back into a part of the world that's full of a lot of hate and violence, and I wasn't sure if I was equipped. I wasn't sure if I was ready. I didn't know if I was ready. So I mean, I think I remember texting CJ a few times, was kind of on the edge, and was like, fuck it, let's just try this thing. It's something I've never done before, but it has all the right people, it has all the right supporters and sitters and facilitators, and it's surrounded by people I trust. Like I didn't get through this through like a TikTok ad. This was through a friend of a friend, right? We had all gone to West Point together, and we had all been in the military together. And that's to say, like, you don't need to have all gone through West Point and been in the military together to find that space. And I think Truxtun offers that space to many, many different types of folks outside of veterans and West Pointers. But for myself, because of how locked in I was and how I think scared I was to feel, this was probably the best place I could have done this at, right? It just kind of clicked, and it all kind of made sense to go to something like Truxtun.
Yeah, it was unbelievable. I remember the text going back and forth beforehand, like, dude, I don't know. I don't
Yeah.
know. And then it's like, dude, I promise you, like, you should come and at least give it a try. At least check us
Yeah.
out. You don't even have to do, you're going to get something out of this, even if you don't do the medicine, even if you don't partake. It's still a great group of people. I think also you kind of touched on it, like the West Point piece and the grad school piece. It's like, it's hard to find other people that like when you're talking to your therapist at the VA, she doesn't understand what it's like to be a plebe at West Point, like walking around cupping your hands and that lived experience of other people uh, that have gone through the same thing, that have walked a mile in your shoes, is really hard to find.
Yeah.
It's like people that get you, that truly get you, without you having to like explain it to them. Of like, oh no, I have like, I, I, I don't know. It's a really challenging thing, and at the same time, I also think it's really hard to, because we've been to these places and because we're, I mean, leaders, right? You're like the last person that's allowed to be like, yo, I don't feel okay, or like
Yeah.
I'm hurting. You are the one that's supposed to be put together at all times, and then you couple that with like, Amos, why are you complaining, dude? You're at HBS. You're at the best business school in the world, man. Everything is great for you, right?
Yeah.
It's like, no,
Yeah.
dude. You take them, like, just come in my mind for 1 second. I promise you, you'll know that everything's not great,
Yeah.
right? So it's really hard to overcome that.
That's really, I mean, that's the thing, right? Like on paper, so many of us look like a darling resume, right? Like, cool.
Yeah.
I got to go to West Point, an amazing school, graduated at the top of my class, was able to then go take a Fulbright fellowship and study in Taiwan. That was amazing. What an opportunity it was, right? Like, these things are amazing. School is covered, go back in the army, got to deploy as a tank platoon leader, which was like the dream of all combat arms PL. And then swapped intelligence, worked for one of the agencies when I was in DC. Did some like work in Afghanistan with them, and then on to HBS, right? Like, what a great resume, right? What does it matter, right? And here's the thing, okay, like, it does matter, right? In this world, it gives us the financial freedom, it gives us the space to feel comfortable enough to maybe take a step back and jump off the hamster wheel. That I totally
Yeah.
understand, right? Having the emotional space to do that. But these resumes, right, the people I meet from with these kinds of like just stellar backgrounds, just incredible people, right? And they'll tell me, I'm not sure I feel happiness, right? And it becomes, I think it's just very clear that it has nothing to do with, I mean, it has a little bit to do, you still need financial freedom. This is, I mean, I will harp on this, right? Because the privilege of having like been deployed and lived in most of these conflict areas, that like I was able to create a financial foundation for myself in order to start exploring things without fear. And that's honestly not something a lot of people get the opportunity to do. So I do want to caveat with that, right? Because it is a very privileged thing to be able to say, like, we come from these institutions and say we're not happy. Yeah, it's a crazy thing to say, right? But like, pulling away from the prestige and all these institutions is just the idea of like, what's the mindset at, right? Like, what is the mindset you had to put yourself in to achieve the success that you have on paper? And was that a healthy mindset, right? And maybe it's not.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's a tough one to rewire, because like, from, it really depends on what kind of, like, even how your parents raise you, like how much they focused you on like doing well in school, or like getting to a good undergrad, or whatever it is, right? Like, achieving excellence. I have a lot of thoughts on like why the Asian cultural mindset of success and excellence devolves into some like pretty severe mental health and cultural identity issues when they immigrate to the US, because there's this like notion of trying to succeed and excel and assimilate into a culture at the cost sometimes of your own identity, right? Like I was born in the U.S., but I moved to China when I was quite young, and then I came back when I was six-ish, and I mean, it was very clear to me at that early age that speaking Chinese was not a good thing. Being Chinese was not a good thing, right? And I mean, this was reinforced when I was in the military because of our attitudes toward China, which I'm not going to go into political things, right? Like, I get it, right? But from an identity standpoint, this is very, very tough to be told that where you grew up, your mother tongue, your language, your identity was bad. And these things are things you have to kind of work with. So, yeah, I think I lost my train of thought a little bit, but the general idea is that, like, you know, we are who we are based on all these external circumstances that have shaped us, and we don't have to let it define who we are. We can go internal and try to figure out what are the internal circumstances that create the person that we are.
Yeah, that was beautiful. I want to like so many things that you just said. I want to ask questions about. And maybe to start off, like it sounds like you experienced a similar thing where it's like you leave the military and you have this paradox of like too many choices where you're like, dude, I could do anything. I just don't
Yeah.
even know who I am or what I want. And it's
Yeah.
like, so we start, like, I think Truxton's cool because it's like you just start internally, like regulating your own nervous system and like
Yeah.
learning how to be comfortable in your body and like feel
Yeah.
these feelings. And we do things like cold exposure and we do things like yoga to like really bring people into their body. And then, yeah, I wonder, like, you mentioned like studying in Taiwan and then having this, almost like this xenophobia of like serving your country where like people are like telling you that you're not okay because of you didn't choose like where you none of us choose like how we're born, right?
Yeah.
I wonder like did any of that come up for you on any of your journeys where like you were contemplating like your identity and your lived experience or like did it help you in any way with that with becoming at peace with your own self?
Yeah. Well, I'll be frank, right? Um, I think Taiwan was when I was in Taiwan, I was in a place where I started to understand like what cultural identity became was a thing for me, right? Like how important being Asian was as well as American. I would say the most recent thing I've been struggling with has been being American, right?
Okay.
You know, in the last 2 years, not even the last 2 years, the last, my entire service time in the military, right? When I'm in the Middle East and we're watching Afghanistan fall in 2021, we were watching the second fall of ISIS in 2018/2019, right, in Iraq. And you're going back to these countries, right? And you're just not sure if America these days, right? Like there's a constant question of who's the good guy and who's the bad guy, right? I'm of the opinion there are no bad guys. There's not necessarily any good guys either, right? Um, it's just people that end up hurting one another, and the problem is, you know, I'm really into peace and love these days. I'm really firmly anti-violence, and it was really hard, I think, to come to terms with what the institutions I was a part of did in these regions of the world, right, and continue to do. I mean, this is not meant to be a political thing, right? But like the support we put behind the country that commits the atrocities to Palestinians on the ground in Gaza and the West Bank is this country, is the U.S., right? I've had IDF shove American issued M4s into my face, right? Which is the weapon I used to carry when I was in the military. And that's very dystopian. There was a large part of me that struggled with coming back to the US because I didn't know if I wanted to be American, you know. And I would say one of the one of the most recent retreats, right, that was when I did my second retreat with Truxtun. It was like 3 days after I got back to the US. And I was talking to Ben, who is like my sitter and my coach during this, and was like, dude, I'm in a pretty fucked up state, right? Like the U.S. had detained me when I got to the border. They had gone through all my shit because I was coming from a part of the world that they didn't like very much, and I felt very unwelcome in this country. Right? And I was like, why am I here? Why do I, you know? And I was very close to not coming back. I was in this position where like I could do my work from any country in the world. I could go remote. I could speak other languages. Why do I need to be in the U.S.? Why do I need to continue being American? And the fact of the matter is that like as I explored, not necessarily just during the retreat, but like through the integration and spending time in the U.S., I understood that I am still fundamentally, yes, like American, right? These are the values and things that I grew up on with China and with Taiwan as well. But being American is also part of me, right? And in spite of the things that this country does that I may or may not agree with, doesn't change the fact that I carry a U.S. passport and I was born in the U.S. and I served this country. And there was a lot of acceptance that came with understanding that, right? It's easy to want to reject the parts of ourselves that we don't like. In this moment, it was being American. Easy to reject that. Also easy to leave. I could just bounce out, go anywhere in the world, right? Why be here? The harder choice was to sit with that feeling. And this is the curious part, and back to what we talked about, feeling the feeling, but not being the feeling. Feeling the uncomfortability of being American and being part of this institution that is currently, in my opinion, doing a lot of harm to the world, yet not allowing that to encompass me and to take over every facet of my being and to deregulate me and make me feel like a bad person, right? And in doing so, right, by accepting that I am, yes, American, and I have this identity part, and I have spent a lot of time in this country, and I do love this country, it gives me the ability to live here comfortably, with happiness, with contentment, but also with a drive to figure out like how do I add value into society and be the change that I want to see, right? How do I help folks maybe to see that being American maybe doesn't have to mean going to parts of the Middle East and hurting people we don't even know, right? How do we help folks reshape what being American means to them in a really positive light? Because I had to do that for myself, right? Like, it's easy to run away, right? It's harder to sit with the feeling, allow the feeling in you, and then find acceptance in that, and then understand what you can do with that acceptance.
Yeah, it's so beautifully said. I think there's like so many good lessons in there, like that two truths can be true at the same time, and like you can hold space for multiple emotions in your body at the same time. Like you can
Yeah.
feel grief and feel joy and feel the both at the same time. Like it doesn't have to be completely binary. I think maybe that's like something that comes up a lot on these retreats is that people kind of they're able to step away from like the bias of their own ego or their own lived experience and kind of feel this sense of like universality where they're like, oh yeah, at the end of the day, like everyone on earth is like at one point was an infant and came from a mother and a father who only just wanted to protect them and keep them safe and warm and fed,
Yeah.
and like we're all just like a part
Oh, just
of the
human.
universe. Like we're all the same, like,
Yeah.
and like I think having that like paradigm shift helps a lot of people, especially people that come from our background where we become so inculcated in our values to the point where we even like hate like the Naval Academy. And then like meanwhile CJ will invite like all these lacrosse players from the Naval Academy, and then we're like total boys at the end of the retreat because we're like, oh, it's like the Spider-Man meme, like we are the same, like regardless of like, but it applies like universal, like across, the country and across the world, like,
Yeah.
dude, we're all the same.
All the
It's
same.
beautiful.
Doesn't
Yeah.
matter. Yeah. No. It's back to the retreats a little bit, right? Like one of the first things I think you and Ben and CJ kind of told me was this idea of letting go and accepting, right? And I'm not going to pretend like psilocybin is this like magical thing that like leads us on the merry path of like happiness and contentment, because it is not that to me, right? But it does put you in a position where you have to surrender control, and that's like something that is like a very metaphorical example of like everything we need to do in life. Is that like, guess what, yeah, you were born in America, you grew up in China, you lived in Taiwan, you're all these different types of identities, you're part Japanese, whatever it is, you lived in the Middle East for a while. These things, many of which I had no control over, they're just things, right? They're part of the journey. They are who you are, and you have to find ways to love all of these parts of yourself. Um, and to accept that there is no necessarily right choice, right? There are only choices that hurt yourself or help yourself, in my opinion, and the rest of the world as well, right? And my opinion is that if you make choices that, from a loving, content standpoint, that are trying to help yourself and the rest of the world, there is no wrong choice, right? Like whatever you decide is the right choice for you. And that's kind of the idea of letting go of control, right? Like whatever you do, it's going to be okay if you're doing it from a point of contentment and love and happiness. It can only be the right decision, or not even the right decision. It can only be the decision that helps you and the rest of the world. But the trouble is, like, I mean, I think this is really hard for folks. Is like, how do you enter a state where you truly are content and
Hmm.
feeling some sort of peace in your heart, and you have love? You know, that's a really hard state to get to. And something like psilocybin, which helps you, or Truxtun, which provides you the space to access those emotions, becomes really, really important. Because if you can't even access those emotions, right, how do you make decisions from that vantage point? I don't know. You can make very rational, like cold, logical decisions, which is what we do in the military, and it's honestly probably what I did out of the military for a while as well. But those are not necessarily loving for you, right? Rationally, we can do any sort of mental gymnastics in order to get to a point where we convince ourselves that this is the best thing for us. It doesn't mean it's the best thing for us, right? But if you're operating from a position of love already, and then you're making this decision, then it can only be the good decision for you.
Yeah. It's awesome.
Yeah.
It makes me think of actually a mantra that I've been like doing. I think a lot of us, especially like where we come from, we get attached so much to the outcome. I mean, we were talking about this last week,
Yeah.
right? The outcome of like, oh, we need to have this happen. We need these people. We need this. We need that. And it's like, I mean, it's ingrained in us. I mean, we need to accomplish the mission. Whatever happens, we need to get this done. And like a mantra that I've been working on actually, it's like from the Bhagavad Gita, with no desire for success, no anxiety about failure. indifferent to results, he burns up his actions in the fire of wisdom. And I've just been saying that to myself over and over and over again, right? And it's just like this once you unattach yourself, it's what Amos is talking about. I think this too, a lot during the call, is this, you know, I am not, or it's like it's going from I am anxious to I am aware of my anxiety, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like it's like stimuli, kind of like lengthening the stimuli to response that we talk about often. Amos, when did that click for you? Did that click like during your time in Palestine? When did that like when did you feel like you had these like it clicked?
Yeah. I mean, this is a lifelong journey, right? Like I'm going to be on this path forever, which is a beautiful thing, right? I think for a lot of folks it's scary, but I I won't say there's been just like one click, right? There's been a ton of smaller little moments where it starts to build on each other and it starts to make more sense. Um, so this kind of goes back to the second retreat where the second retreat I entered, I think the retreat in a very tough spot. You know, I had just gotten back from Palestine, was having a crisis about what it means to be American, was in a country that I felt quite uncomfortable for me. Um, and even though on paper it was much safer than somewhere like Palestine or whatever, I kind of wanted to go back because that's what I was used to. That's where I found my happiness. Um, so the honestly, that retreat was really tough. I had a really tough journey during the psilocybin portion. Uh, and at the end of it, right, like all I wanted to do was to go home and think about that and like unpack and unravel and figure out what the hell was going on. And instead of doing that, I was lucky enough to had the foresight to do a Vipassana retreat right afterwards. So 2 days after this Truxtun retreat, I went and did like 11 days silent meditation out in the desert in Joshua Tree.
So cool.
It was so sick, right? And the cool part of that was Vipassana, which is like a really core tenet of Buddhism, I would say. It's very meditation focused, right? Vipassana is all about feeling, right? Sitting there, meditating, not doing anything, not thinking, not moving, not, you know, visualizing, not coaching yourself, not saying words, just sitting there and being, right? Being and feeling. And I think it was during that retreat I had that kind of moment that clicked a little bit, right? That's all these things we kind of go through, right? We can intellectualize all day, right? Like everyone is a smart human being and they have the ability to make rational decisions in their life, right? And you can go through every single bit of the logic book. You can pull up any evidence you need. You can go through any sort of philosophical framework, part of history, your history, money, whatever, right? Status, power, security. You can go through any number of things in order to create the justification you need to do what you want to do, what you think you want to do, right? But during this silent meditation, right, I realized that, and this was combined, I think, with the neuroplasticity of the psilocybin retreat, was, hey, like, I can just be. And this is a really hard notion to wrap a mind around, because the very notion of this mindset is being, not thinking, right? And in this moment when you can simply be, there's this tremendous amount of acceptance for who you are and what you do. And that was kind of the click, right? It's just like, yes, I can think through all these things. I can think through all the tough moments of my psilocybin retreat and what's been going on the past year in Palestine, or like what it means to be American or whatever it is, right? or I could sit here, feel all those feelings, and neither ascribe positive or negative connotations with any of those feelings, and then just be,
Mhm.
right? So that was a pretty remarkable moment for me when I walked out of the silent meditation retreat like 11 days later and was like, okay, like these things that have happened to us, these things that we have done in the past, the things that we are trying to do now, or the things that we hope to do in the future, they're all just things, right? And what does it mean to sit there with all these things we've done and have acceptance with everything, with every decision we made? It's tough. You kind of need to sit there and just and feel that, you know, which is easier said than done, right? Because like very few people. I mean, I try now to meditate 1 hour in the morning, 1 hour in the evening. Honestly, if I get an hour a day, that's really pretty good. Like very few people have time to like sit there and meditate an hour and not think, right? Because you on this, like we talked about in the past, you're always on this like hamster wheel of like chasing the job or doing this work. You're gonna have kids, family, obligations, and I get it, right? These things are all very important. But if I have learned anything, right, it's just like you have to. The best place to give to the world is from a place that is overflowing. And if you don't figure
Yeah.
out, yeah, right, like if you don't figure out the time to give to yourself, yes, you can continue giving to the world. You can be still a great dad. You can still be like a good leader. You can still help the world. You can be a humanitarian aid actor, right? But you continue digging yourself in this hole where you're taking and taking and taking. You're never filling it up.
Yeah.
Yeah, man.
You make so many awesome points. And by the way, Sophie just rolled out of bed. She says hi. Um, she like oh so like when you invest in yourself, like you did with those two silent retreats and with the Truxtun retreat, you're making like this like compounding return on your investment every time you do that. Whereas like if you were just giving to your community, your friends and family, and your work environment with like the leftover reserve of what you have from your
Yeah.
bandwidth of your energy every day, it's like a fraction of a penny. But like when you take the time to take a knee for 11 days, turn your phone off and like go inward, you come out with this like surplus of life force. It's like
Yeah.
this like incredible like gift that then you give to yourself first, and then out of the overflow of that, you're able to like have so much more love and like energy to give to people. And you also, yeah, like sounds like your perspective has changed where it's like, dude, it doesn't really matter what the accolades are, what the prestige or the paycheck is. It's like more about like, do I feel good? Like, am I at peace?
Yeah.
Period.
Exactly. Right. How do you do work where you show up for yourself as much as you show up for other people? You know, and that's a really hard thing to do. To find work that's aligned with that, and it's not easy in this world, right? A lot of the work we do is well, just because of the nature of our industry and the things we're trying to create in this world can be very toxic. If
Yeah.
you're just like a perpetual AI social media algorithm marketer, your goal is to get people glued to your screen. That's your job, you know? Um, and I'm not here to say like a job is right or wrong or bad or good, right? It's just, once again, like, are you doing things that are hurting people or helping people? Or are you doing things that are hurting yourself or hurting yourself? Um, yeah, the things we decide to do in this world, right? No matter what it is, if you do it from a position of love, true love, right? Not one-sided love. I think this is a common sentiment where like I will do things for out of love for my tribe and my people and my family, but not for others, right? I think people kind of misconstrue that a little bit. And yeah, it means like taking time to invest in yourself and like spend time by yourself, but But once again, I also want to remark again, like this is an incredibly privileged thing to do, right? Like who gets to take off, in my case, 2 weeks from work and life and whatever, and turn off their phone and like go off into the desert. Very, very few people do, right? Like that's a crazy thing. And I don't know how to get around that, and I don't know if you guys have opinions on what that means. I don't know how like folks that are like at a time when early in my let's say army career, when you're like going paycheck to paycheck, right, and just trying to like figure out how to like survive, like how do you take the time to do these kinds of things? And like my only like answer is like the little bit moments every day, right? You can do something extreme like a psilocybin retreat or like a 12-day, 10-day silent meditation in the desert, or you can take 15 minutes of every day and sit there
Hmm.
and just turn off your brain and be in touch with your
Yeah.
feelings and feel what love is to you, right? But it's hard, right? I don't put that past anyone. People are not in situations to do this. Like people in Palestine in conflict zones and war zones, like they're suffering, and it's hard to take this kind of time to themselves, right? Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, it's like I was thinking about what you're saying with regard to taking time off, having the ability to do that, and what came to mind is like maybe having to like relearn that like abundance is a state of mind. Like it's not a dollar amount in the bank. And I think that took me some time to realize like, oh, it doesn't matter. Like it really doesn't matter. Like you could you could be without a lot. And as long as you have and actually, there's this cool book called How Yoga Works, where it's like basically this person got locked up in jail and just did yoga every day. And by the end of it, like the prison guards gave them the key to the jail cell, and they were like, I don't really need to go anywhere. I'm happy. Like if you're happy internally, like it doesn't really matter where you are. Like if you have like that's the cool thing that I think we can all kind of take like a little daily microdose to remember, like just a little 15-minute
yeah,
meditation, and then you're kind of like, oh yeah, I'm good, you know?
yeah, yeah. And I like the way you said microdose, right? It's
Yeah.
these tools that we utilize to create the space are just tools. We can create the space ourselves. Something like psilocybin, something like Truxtun, creates a really curated, powerful place where it's much easier to enter the space. But it's
Hmm.
not necessarily, if you don't have the financial means or you don't have the time or the space or whatever it is, like it's not necessarily what you have to do, right? It's about taking that time to yourself. And the same way that Truxton can create a place of safety and comfort and vulnerability and love and compassion amongst like-minded individuals, you can do that for yourself every day, all the time, with the people you surround yourself with the time you spend with yourself, right? These retreats and these things are just a way to accelerate the progress, in my opinion, with folks and professionals that are dedicated to helping you accomplish these things. But it's not necessary. Nothing is necessary, right? It's something that is helpful. It's something that can put you into space. Yeah.
What else? What do we want to close up on? Do we,
I don't know. What
what
do you think
is
about?
Well, what are you thinking?
Well, I would love to know, like, I'm curious what excites you today. Like, what are you stoked about right now? And like, what are you looking forward to this year?
Yeah. Yeah, man. It's cool. So, like, in the last few months since I've been back to US, I really had a chance to sit down and reflect, hey, like, if I was to really search within myself, what are the things I want to do in this world that helps me, as I said before, show up for myself as much as I show up for other people? And this is actually like, maybe this is, it doesn't sound like a remarkable question, but this is a question I've never asked myself. This is a question I feel that a lot of people have not asked themselves either, right? Because even the most altruistic people in the world, they tend to only think about others, not themselves, right? And that's so the selfish people in this world tend to think about only themselves and not others. So, like, how do you ask both? So I've been asking that question of myself a lot, and have kind of started down this new pathway, that is both a new career, but also just a new perspective towards life. So I'm just really excited to go down this journey, right? This journey, I'm looking to go down is the lens of becoming a somatic practitioner, is working with folks, to help realize not necessarily the best version of themselves, but the most content version of themselves, which may be the best version of themselves, right? But it's really exciting, right? Like, I'm coaching a youth climbing team at my gym in DC, and it's a non-competitive youth team, right?
Cool.
And yeah, what happens in a sport when the sport, especially at a young age, has no competitions associated with it? What does it mean to get better, right? What if getting better on this team is not about being physically stronger in climbing, but it's about feeling more content on the wall, or having better emotional awareness while you're moving on the wall, or it's understanding how are these lessons of fear, anxiety, and stress while you're climbing, how do you take these lessons and pull them away into the real world? How do you better regulate your personal emotions, right? And if you get better at climbing, I think it's a natural byproduct, but it is not the end state, right? So redefining what it means to get better for folks in a healthy way. I'm saying this from a climbing landscape, but like, it could be from any landscape, from a career landscape. It could be from being a father. It could be from, I don't know. It could be from anything, right? Like, what does it mean to redefine the notion of getting better that is really healthy for you and healthy for the world around you? This is something I'm really excited to start doing, right? I'm going to start doing some work with Truxtun too, which is really exciting. So with Truxtun, with climbing, with somatic coaching, these are all really beautiful things. I'm excited to see like what this year brings. This is unprecedented for me. I don't know. Right? This is the first time I lacked so little structure in my life, but it's fun and it's exciting and it's a journey and it's a joy to be able to have these little clicks every day, understanding like which one of these things like truly align with my internal compass the most.
I'm so excited to see where that goes.
Yeah.
I just thought about surfing because it's a similar parallel with rock climbing where it's like the best surfer in the water is the one that's having the most fun. Like,
Yeah.
it doesn't
Yeah.
matter like how many waves you catch or how big the waves were.
Yeah.
And the whole time you're out there teaching somebody to climb or you're coaching them, it's like there are these like psychological, mental, emotional things that are clicking in people's brains where it's like, oh yeah, like this is all just such a great metaphor for life and how to like walk through life gracefully and kind of find that contentment and inner peace.
Yeah.
That's so cool, man.
So stoked.
One last. What is something that you would tell yourself before coming on the first retreat, or something that you'd tell someone considering coming on their first retreat? What would you want to know?
Man, there's so many things I would want to know. Yeah, I think I mean this is just what we kind of been talking this whole time, right? having the awareness to feel is is it's a radical idea, honestly, right? Like and it seems like a sensible thing to do. It seems like a very common thing, we can feel, right? But I mean, I'll tell you, right? Like most of us, if I told you, to pinpoint let's say a dime size part of your calf, and I told you to feel that part of your calf, would not be able to do that, right? But that's a part of your calf, and your calf's a part of your body, and it's kind of crazy if you can't feel that part of your calf. But like most of us can't do it, right? Because we just literally don't spend time with it. So something I would have loved to like had the ability to do, before the first Truxtun retreat was have the awareness to like stop and just feel. I wanted to intellectualize everything, right? You want to think through your feelings. You want to think through what you want to do with this retreat. You want to think through like what you're going to get out of it. You want to think through what you're trying not to think about it, right? Like it was so funny. I think at the beginning of the psilocybin journey, I mean, I was telling myself, let go of control. And in the act of telling myself to let go of control, I was taking control, right? And that wasn't working quite well, right? And I guess like if something I could tell myself is just like, hey, like the mind is a beautiful thing. Thinking is amazing, right? It's obviously how we interact with this world. Words are amazing. Imagery is amazing. But in these types of scenarios, right, when you really try to go inward and access inwards, right, there are no images, words, pictures, thoughts, philosophical frameworks, right, that can describe it besides the feeling itself, having awareness of that feeling. And that's something, I mean, I could have told myself that, I wouldn't have understood it. But if that's something I could have understood prior to the retreats, I think that would have gone a long ways. That would have been really, really powerful for myself.
It will only make sense when you're here.
Yeah. Yeah, it does, right? We can talk about this all day. It doesn't fucking matter. It's just like, it's an intellectual exercise. Words, right? Like, vernacular doesn't even mean anything, right? Chinese is my first language, and here I am speaking in English to you guys, trying to elucidate this crazy, like, feeling of psychedelic emotions.
Yeah.
No, like it's meant to be felt, and it's hard to feel unless you take the time to stop and feel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Such great advice.
I think that's a unreal spot to close Truxtun Talks 1.
Yeah.